There's a whole set of subsidiary questions that come up here, and Paul is answering on several different levels. All sorts of different questions come up. Does the pagan divinity really exist? Do I have to worry about what somebody else thinks if I eat? One thing which you're clear about at the end is that you, as an ordinary believer, have to know whether you are going to eat the meat or not. You have to work that out and be able to explain why, as a Christian, you're eating it or you're not eating it. Now put that question to Peter or to James. They can't answer it. Nobody had ever invited them to dinner. Everybody knew that observant Jews didn't sit at pagan dinner tables. If these people had become Jewish proselytes, they wouldn't be invited either. You've got to have a new style of discipleship where Christians can sit at pagan dinner tables and perhaps talk about Christ there. A completely new set of rules in a different culture. And I think lots of the New Testament epistles you can read in that way, the construction of this new way of being Christian. Leaving us with this this bicultural position in the church. A single community in which those born into Jewish life and culture remain in it. Those born into the wider Hellenistic society of the East Mediterranean remain in it. Where they meet at the same table and share as brothers and sisters, as a bi-cultural community for which there was no parallel in the ancient world. It was difficult. You could see how in the Paul's letters this question never goes away. Peter is theologically convinced of this way. He, after all, is the person who's put it out at the Council of Jerusalem. He himself is quite prepared. After all, he'd apparently stayed with Cornelius's family after that first meeting. He's quite prepared to, when he comes to Antioch, to sit down to the table with ex-pagan brethren who are now Israelites, who are now fellow Israelites. Think of Ephesians here, this stress on calling people fellow citizens, members of Israel. That's what's happened to them. But they're not Jews. They're Israelites, but they're not Jews. The distinct cultures remain. But going back to Peter, he's theologically convinced, he's personally convinced, he's quite prepared himself to sit down at the table with his new friends and brothers in Antioch. Until you see somebody's coming from Jerusalem. and he knows that word will get back. And he remembers he's got an appointment somewhere else. It is a huge difficulty in the early church, but it's got to be held together. This bicultural community is in itself a witness, in which the middle wall of partition has been broken down. We tend to think of that Ephesians picture as referring to race. Let's remember, in the setting of the time, race wouldn't have been so much the point as culture. People didn't always look all that different. It's the way that they live. And the two cultures, the wall between them is broken down by the cross of Christ. And they share in the Commonwealth of Israel. The Commonwealth of Israel, that's not going to count among other Jews, among most Jews, among the majority of Jews, is not going to get them admission to the temple. What does Ephesians say? This is building a new temple. A new temple in the Spirit, in which Jews and Gentiles meet together, in which converted Jewish culture and converted Hellenistic culture are alike building blocks for this new temple. Or, as he goes on, they are organs, anatomical organs within a functioning body, of which Christ is the head, the brain. Without both sets of building blocks, the temple won't be made. Without both sets of organs, the body won't function. The two cultures belong together. Belong to each other. Because neither is complete in itself. And as the epistle goes on, we come to the climax, until we all come together to the full stature of Christ. We come together to the full stature of Christ. We won't get there on our own, or just with our own set. The full stature of Christ requires the coming together of the different bits of converted social reality. All our representations of humanity are partial, always. We do not represent the whole of humanity, but a part of humanity. Each of those parts has to be converted, has to be turned towards Christ. The full stature of Christ requires all those converted. Only in Christ is humanity complete. That, I think, is where our story begins, and there, I think, is the groundwork, the ground pattern for all the later crossings of the cultural frontier. We could spend a lot of time on seeing what has to happen before the gospel is translated into Greek. We might even do that if we have time. But this is where it all starts. Here is the first cultural frontier, crossed within the New Testament period itself. And there is the pattern for all the future frontier crossings. Christians are converts. They have come through a gate of conversion, of turning. But they are not proselytes. They do not have to accept the pattern of life followed by those from whom they received the gospel. It is their own piece of social reality which is to be turned towards Christ. Just think what would have happened had the Council of Jerusalem decided the other way. The easy would have been, yes, these people are proselytes. They should fulfill the Torah. They are stags who feed with the sheep. They should be circumcised. They then enter Israel fully. I think you might have got some very high quality Christian discipleship. You wouldn't have got nearly so many disciples. It would have been enough to turn many, many Gentiles away. Those who did follow would be very sincere, having counted the cost and come through considerable cost. You might avoid some excesses. I've sometimes wondered what would happen if some conservative Jerusalem believer happened to read 1 Corinthians, and whether they wouldn't shake their head and say, "Told you so. This is what's going to happen if people don't have the Torah. These heathen need a framework."
Islam?
Exactly. Fully in the Jewish